So I'm Richard Aceves. I've been a coach, mentor, athlete, I would say almost my whole life. I'm always a student of a craft. So I started off in the culinary world, then got into rock climbing and CrossFit and strength and conditioning, powerlifting. Got in a rock climbing accident and spent 4 months in bed. So essentially we have to do feet here. So like at 20,000 feet of altitude, I got hit by a rock slide. It was about 14 hours on the side of the mountain. They got me down the mountain into the hospital. My hip was broken to about 30 plus pieces. I've had 2 ulnar replacements. I had my pubic bone pushed all the way up. So they put an external fixator. I spent about 4.5-ish months in bed. And the doctor said, you know, luckily nothing happened in the spine, so there's no nerve damage going through the spine. So we'll see how you recover, but more than likely not going to walk, walk minimally, not lift anything heavy. Don't think about going back to rock climbing. Essentially just covering their butts, I would say, but gave me the diagnosis that I was going to be sedentary and more than likely riddled with pain the rest of my life. I'm a very stubborn person, so I was like, yeah, no, I don't think so. So I spent those months in bed. You can come in. I spent those months in bed learning about the human body and learning about, more of strength and conditioning and diving deeper into CrossFit methodologies and just really starting to understand why is it that I won't be able to do these things and what can I do in order to be able to do, these things of lifting heavy and X, Y, and Z. So for me, whatever I read, I also went on a more intuitive base. So a lot of my coaching and my mentoring is very intuitive as to how I feel. So the first thing that I thought is, when I was out of shape and I was trying to get in shape, what was it that I needed? To bring my heart rate up, to get blood flow going. So if I'm laying in bed, there's no blood flow, there's no heart rate elevating, there's no way for me to actually be fit. So I told my mom to buy bands, and every morning I would wake up and I'd be doing, bicep curls and doing some leg lifts if possible, just trying to get as much movement throughout the whole day, even though I was laying in bed. So blood flow allowed me to get better. And so I just started to do my own recovery. After I taught myself to walk again, about 5-6 months after that, I was deadlifting 400 pounds. So I was like, well, it is doable. Now, there are parts in the medical world where you should listen to your doctors. The bone hadn't fully healed or connected. So therefore, I was deadlifting 400 pounds with an ulna that was connected by screws. So I had to, not the smartest thing to do. So I had to go down and redo I had another surgery where they put a bigger titanium rod and a new bone replacement, a new bone graft. And then that connected, and then I had, I started training again, and then the screws that I had on the pubic bone popped out. So then I had to go and get that hardware taken out, and then I came back, and then I started powerlifting. And I tore my entire forearm. That's why it looks kind of funky. I tore all of the forearm muscle off of the bone doing a bench press competition. So I had to go back down, get that done. But after about 5 years, no more surgeries were needed. I was lifting heavy. I was doing CrossFit. I ran a successful CrossFit gym. And I reached a point where recurring injuries just kept coming back. So my shoulder kept coming back in pain. Like there was a point where I couldn't lift my arm up overhead. So, I did the common sense athletic thing to do, which is pop ibuprofen like it's candy before you go train. And then I can go train, be without pain. Then I would go ice it. Then I would go to the chiropractor. I would go to the acupuncturist. I would go to the physiotherapist. And, this would continue and continue and continue until I could just no longer move the arm. Then I would take like 6 weeks completely off, go to the physiotherapist, not do any heavy lifting. The arm would feel great again. And then because my body knew that it could handle the weights, I would go straight back to lifting heavy, and then the arm would start to pop again, right? So I don't know if you guys have ever been there or know people that have been there. The same thing with my lower back. It would take me about 40 minutes to get out of bed. But once you get moving and once you are able to stretch and roll out and put on the lacrosse ball and kind of get the QL to free up a little bit, I would go deadlift. But then here comes the PR weight at 600 pounds. And then what would happen, my back would blow out, and I would have to go through this whole physiotherapy, chiropractor. Like I just had it on speed dial every 6 weeks to 8 weeks. go through that same cycle. I was like, something's missing. Because how is it that in the last year I haven't progressed in my performance? My recurring injuries are happening more frequently and at higher intensities. And the physiotherapist that I was going at the time said, well, you know, maybe we just need to tone it down a little bit. Or your QL is tight and you have tight hip flexors and we're going to massage this. We're going to do some dry needling. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And the chiropractor would tell me something else. And then, everybody would have an answer to my symptoms, but not a solution to my problem.
Can you say that again?
Everybody had the answer to my symptoms, why my symptoms were happening, but nobody had a solution for it.
Not even PT, nobody, not even PT.
That was my problem. So I needed to find, at that point I was like, I need to find somebody that can help me. I found my mentor at the time, Julian, and he, the first thing that we did is we did an assessment, and he said, well, your left lat isn't working, and that's why your shoulder keeps getting messed up. And I was like, I had big lats, like I looked like a bodybuilder. I was very well aesthetically looking, shall we say, right? The muscle was there, but the quality wasn't there of the muscle.
You say your left lat was...
The left lat was not, yeah, the left teres major particularly. So what that would do is, if we look at what the teres major does, is it helps load on the eccentric face of a bench press. Since I don't have the lat, I lose and I stack right there. So now I come down, I press up. So what happens? You inflame your infraspinatus, your mid-trap, a very small muscle that helps pull the shoulder back so you don't round. So if you do that enough and with enough load, it's going to inflame and then it's going to pop. So we built up the lats. I couldn't hinge, even though I could deadlift 600 pounds, and at that time it was like 650, getting closer to 700. I could deadlift, but I wasn't actually hinging. So I was doing everything with mid-back and low back. So in actually learning to hinge and getting the hamstring stronger and getting, more importantly, the left glute max to fire, I was able to deadlift at, I think after 3 months, I got a PR deadlift, and there was absolutely no pain whatsoever. And I could do it the next day, and it was repeatable. So this led me down an entire path of wanting to understand what's been missing with the current fitness industry and what's been missing with the way that we approach training, recurring injuries, and discomfort. And then that kind of rabbit hole led me to wanting to understand the nervous system, and then having experiences where it goes a lot deeper into the psychological aspect or the emotional aspect. And so we've gotten to a point now where we cannot fragment the body as much as we want to try and fragment the body. So what do I mean by this? If you go to a PT, a physical therapist, they're fragmenting the body to a pure physiological standpoint. And then they're looking at it from a reference of a cadaver and fragmenting the muscles themselves to very specific muscle groups. But in reality, when in life do you ever fragment to only need one muscle to be recruited? When we go out in the real world? Never. The body works as a unit, right? We go to strength and conditioning, and we're only looking at how do we overload the system on a physiological aspect, not taking into consideration the mental side, the mindset, right? We talked about mindset a little bit, not taking into consideration the emotional standpoint. We go to a cognitive therapist to help us with our mental health, with anxiety, depression, PTSD, whatever it may be, and they're only looking at the brain. They don't take into consideration how the body's holding on to stress. Yeah. Right? So this is what kind of led me to understand that the body is an ecosystem. We look at breath work and we only stick to breathing. But breathing is partly a movement, right? So what I started to do is I started to do a lot of assessments. We did seminars around the world showing people that the body does work as a unit. And the body doesn't function through points of position, but through points of tension. Meaning, I can passively get my arm overhead. That's easy to do, right, for most of us. But can we do it with the right muscles, especially under load, under tension, under stress? So we started to look at what does the body actually need from a functional and evolutionary standpoint. And what we noticed is everybody seems to want to work on the smaller stabilizing muscles, and everybody thinks that the larger muscles will be recruited if you get to your points of performance, to your positions. Meaning that if I do a shoulder press, my chest, my teres major, my lats are going to be active. That if I do a push-up, it's going to grow my chest. That if I do squats, my booty and my hamstrings and my quads are going to get bigger.
Well, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. You know what's wrong with that is that it's not true. It's true if it's done correctly. How many times have you guys seen people that have gone to the gym for years and their aesthetics have not changed?
Yeah, but they look good.
But if the aesthetics haven't changed, so let me rephrase this. Have you seen people that can do push-ups but their chest never gets bigger or stronger?
Yeah.
Right? So if the aesthetics aren't changing, there is something missing.
There's that fact.
So it's even understanding people that eat healthy all the time, but they don't lose weight, or their mechanisms aren't changing. Their body isn't changing because there's something missing. So the goal is to get stronger. What happens when you don't get stronger? What happens when you hit the plateau? So the missing link is most of the objective science that is put out there is done with unconditioned people. So if you take anybody off the street that is unconditioned and you give them new stressors for the next 6 weeks, there will be results, there will be changes. So then it's a matter of what do you want that paper to say, and you make it objectively true. But subjectively, that's not true for 95% of the people. And this is where we'll get into the principles, because there are components that are missing. There are things that are being fragmented in each one of the disciplines. And that's what I want to do, is I want to make sure that we can connect all of the disciplines, understanding that you are working with a human. You're not working with a cadaver, right? We're not just working with pure physiological standpoints. We're not working with pure cognitive, a pure cognitive problem. Like if you have mental health issues, it's not a pure cognitive problem. There's also a physical representation of that symptom, right? That's why, like, if you have high stress or high anxiety, you'll have eczema breakouts. If you have gut intolerances, there's also a high chance that you're having either high stress or getting down, or having a lack of hunger, right? You also have mental issues that are tied up to it. They're all feedback loops. So what I want to do is I want to educate coaches that you need to find that root cause, whatever it is, and we start to change how the world is perceived by the person you're working with. Does that make sense to you guys? So we'll go through this, and then we'll kind of tie it all together. Questions? Beautiful. All right, so we'll start with training. So training, right, movement, is always going to be physical, mental, and emotional. Some can add spiritual depending on where you are. Kind of semantics, but any time that you do any form of movement, it's going to have its physical application. There's going to be a mental component to it, meaning you need to strategize, you need to find out what's the best way to approach this movement, build the skill, X, Y, and Z. And then there is also the emotional component. The emotional component is a behavioral standpoint. So when we look at movement or a workout, we need to ask ourselves, are we looking for pure physical, all-out effort at any cost necessary? Do we need to strategize how we're going to approach the workout? Or is there some form of very deep emotional intent behind the movement? Does that make sense? You cannot get to the emotional expression if you do not push physical intensity and mental stress, in order to allow yourself to be purely physical and change. So when I look at training, I've been able to map out the body and put behavioral perceptions into different parts of the body. So I call it emotional mapping. So based on how people hold on to stress, where depending on where your point of discomfort, your pain is, or your lack of connection to a muscle, I can essentially see how your body is observing the world and how it's talking to itself internally. Meaning that if you've had issues with your mentor, your father's side, if you have mom issues, if you have lack of safety in the environment, whether it's external or internal, if you lack the confidence, if you have insecurities, I can see quite a bit of that just by seeing how the body holds on to tension. Right? So for me, anytime that I do movement, I'm doing physical, mental, and emotional work.
Could you give an example of that?
In like the emotional mapping stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can talk about if you're having discomfort coming through the left shoulder, depending where that discomfort is. So the left pec is part of self-love on the bottom part. The upper part is the acceptance of the motherly figure. When you start to falsify the self-love, and I say falsify like you pretend that everything is good and happy, you usually start to see the shoulder do this. And then this starts to become over-socialization because the mid-trap will start to get heavy. And then you can also falsify confidence towards yourself by squeezing the shoulder back. So I can see patterns on how people behave. And again, it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just how your body is observing the world. And we'll get into the reason for that in the neurological side in a little bit. But essentially, the way that I came to this was very subjective, meaning from my own experiences. There's some writings on it from the Maori, like Maori healers use a lot of this type of format, but more on the passive side, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that. There's William Reich and Freud that talked about muscle armoring and how the body's holding on to stressors. Now in the more modern days, you have the cell danger response theory, which means that when there's a sympathetic stress or a stimulus, even though it's happening here, it communicates directly in a nanosecond, like very, very quickly neurologically, to other cells in the body. So when we look at that, we have to understand that stress is just stimulus, right? So stress could be a push-up. A push-up is stress, it's stimulus, it's input coming in. This environment is stimulus always coming in. It's how our body creates or observes that stimulus, sends those signals up to the brain, and creates the prediction on how to behave in this environment. We're predictive, not reactive. Right? So when I look at training, I go, okay, so if we need physical intensity, we need some form of movement that is stressful. That is stressful. We need stress in our lives. We think that stress is always just stress is an overwhelming amount of information without any action afterwards. Right? So we all have, we're in a point in our lives where we have the most amount of mental health issues, both anxiety and depression. We have the highest amount of cognitive therapists and psychologists. Same with physical injuries, we have the highest amount of PTs, and yet the cases keep going up. And so what is it that we have? We have information without action. Right? We get an abundant amount of information coming in. How much of it do we actually take action on? Right? Where's the skin in the game? Right? We have thoughts about political parties, but yet we're not at rallies or doing something about it. We have all this information about everything that's going right, everything that's going wrong, but there's nothing that we do or take action on. Right? So this is where movement can help, because it allows you to get rid of all of that information. Yeah, so for me, the body has stimulus coming in, and it needs to have stimulus going out. Right? And so the problem is that we have all this stimulus coming in, but there is no expression about it. And the stimulus, the stress, is I always say it's a romantic comedy, right? Because we've all watched romantic comedies, right? The Notebook and what's the other one? There's a bunch of them, right? It's always the same plot, isn't it? Always. I don't like you, I kind of hate you, oh my gosh, I'm falling for you, and then, oh, you're going to break my heart, and you broke my heart, but okay, let's be in love forever and ever. Right? It's almost always the exact same plot line. It's different characters, different settings, time periods. It's the same thing. Stress is the same thing. The stress that you're feeling out there will be the stress that you can express in here. That's the beauty of movement. So that's why we always want to have training be physical, mental, and emotional. And it doesn't always need to lead to the emotional expression. And again, emotional, you guys are thinking of crying or having this huge rage fit or laughing uncontrollably. Those are all emotions, but emotional means that you've gained perspective on an event in life and you are able to create a new perception on it. Does that make sense? You're able to change your belief system from a not just pure cognitive standpoint, but also from the physical standpoint. Okay, we'll go a little bit deeper into that after we go through the stimulus and the objective. So, once we get training done, the root of everything comes from stimulus. And so it comes down to our nervous system. Within the nervous system, there's a phylogenetic hierarchy. So essentially, we have, you've heard about the parasympathetic state and the sympathetic state, right? You're either in rest and digest or fight and flight. Now they're saying fight or flight. So in reality, we have 4 main states that we are in based on how our body observes the environment, predicts that it's going to have an experience in that environment, and then experiences that prediction is based on which state you're going to be in. Okay? The flow state, this is part of the ventral vagus nerve. So it's gone, the last 5 years, this has become a very high buzzword that we're going to put you into the flow state and downregulate your nervous system and raise your vagal tone, blah, 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 right? So the flow state is our newest nervous system. It's the newest part of our nervous system. This is where socialization happens. This is where coordination lies. This is where the capacity for you to read facial expressions comes in. So the flow state is necessary, but it's not the be-all that people think about, right? After that, we go into fight or flight. So I want you guys to think this is your sympathetic nervous system. The fight is you winning, you hunting. The flight is you losing or running away. Right? So we've all been there doing a hard workout, and you're like, this feels awesome, this feels great, and then you start to feel maybe a little bit of anxiety or rise of discomfort or intensity in the chest or the shoulders, and then out of nowhere you're like, oh my God, how many more do I have left? Do I have to be here? Can I stop? What if I pretend that I need to go get water? What if I say I have to go pee? Then I can stop moving, right? That's the fight state, right? Is becoming hyper-vigilant and finding a way to get out of your situation. And then after that, if all else fails, you go towards the freeze. This is the dorsal vagus nerve. They say it's part of your sympathetic nervous system, but I believe that is extremely wrong. It's part of your parasympathetic nervous system. The freeze state is part of a full collapse. It's playing dead. It's not feeling anything. So, I don't know if you guys have ever been pushing the sleds, and you finish pushing the sleds, and you're just kind of like in this position, and maybe you still have like a length to go, and Edgar's yelling at you, and you can barely even hear what he's saying, and you're just kind of like in this very zonked out moment, right? That's part of playing dead. The body is trying to figure out what's it worth getting the system back up to start to move again, right? I don't know if anybody's ever lost somebody close to them and the whole body just goes numb, right? That's the dorsal vagus nerve in action. Your body goes into almost full autopilot. You have no sensation anywhere. You can't feel anything, right? Like if you've pushed the sled enough, it's not that everything hurts. Everything is just completely numb and there's nothing you can do. And then afterwards, what happens? And then the legs start to burn, right? Mental anxiety. And you're like, oh my God, I need to move. Maybe if I move, I can start to get myself out of the pain. You start to move, you kind of come back up, and the heart rate goes up and it still burns, so you come back down, right? You start to play. You're always going to be in one state versus the other based on how you're experiencing the world. So the fact that people always want you to be in a flow state, they're really trying to get you into a free state.
You know how you said you don't mind going off topic?
I don't mind.
So, in situations like not in the gym but in the real world,
Yes.
when there's a traumatic event, and I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this before, and police come or whatever, it's a traumatic event. You call 911. Everyone's telling you, meaning me, you just need to calm down. You just need to calm down.
Yeah, absolutely not.
No, why are they saying that?
Right. Because it's they have a different perception of the world. The problem is that your perception is your reality. So meaning we could both have the same exact situation and we'll behave completely different. And so they're saying that because they're seeing it from a outside perspective, and they're like, you can just calm down, then we can get rationalization, and then you can handle things in a much better way, where they're not in your situation where everything's going haywire. So it's a perception problem. So, I mean, I learned very quickly not to tell my wife to relax, right? You just ever do that, right?
It works sometimes. I'm kidding.
I'm not trying it again. So it's a matter of perception. It's your system has learned to behave in a certain way because it's your body is a reinforcement learning machine.
But I mean, and truly, I want your opinion on this because you have all this research. So, is there a better way to react? Because it seems like the people that are in the freeze mode in moments like that actually get taken more serious. They tend to be respected more. But it's not that I'm understanding what's going on. I'm just more of like a fight person than a freeze person.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Like,
getting off topic.
No, it's not off topic. It's so the reason that you're more of a fight person, or you're more of a, we call them like an anxious driver than a sad. Like I'm more of a sadness driver. So when shit goes haywire, I'm like, okay, very calm. Like, what are the steps that I need to do? And I go inward. You go outward. And it's learned behavior. So from when you were very young to now, there's been events in your life that have caused you to behave, to react, or predict moments in this manner.
But I'm learning that the real world wants me to freeze, and so I don't fight as much anymore. I like do the freeze because then people start to respect me more.
And that's when you can start to talk about, that then it starts to become more of an identity issue or crisis, right? Not crisis, but essentially you're always fighting between, so it's like playing like 4D chess. Between the states, you also have 4 identities that you're playing. So we're all schizophrenic of sorts, right? We have the inner child, right? Our innocent selves. We have the id, which is the primal self. You have the ego that is controlling how much of the primal self can come out to the superego, and then you have the superego, how you think society views you and how you should behave in society. So based on the events that you're in, you start to behave a certain way because that's how you think society needs you to behave. Does that make sense? So everything is it's a constant
and it's
conditioning.
not the way that society wants him to behave. I just know that that's the best way to get respect, or the best way to be taken seriously, is that I just need to freeze and I go against what my true stimulus wants to do, and I just need to be more anyway.
Right. No, but that's, so what happens is that you're doing this, right? And so then it's what's called a somatic error. So that's essentially what anxiety is a somatic error, right? So stay within this topic, you guys, if you can stay with me. The brain and how neuroscience works, there's this wonderful genius of a man called Carl Friston, who's putting essentially quantum mathematics into neuroscience, and he has this principle called the free energy principle. The body is constantly trying to conserve as much energy as possible, keeping you here, so that when it's needed, you can fight as hard as possible. From an evolutionary standpoint, we couldn't order Uber Eats if we were hungry. We couldn't turn on the heater if we were cold. We couldn't air conditioning our car if we were hot, right? We had to go do things. So the bodies learn how to best behave and conserve energy on this sort of autopilot mode, okay? So the somatic error happens because your body is observing something, it's sending it to the brain. There's a prediction on how you're going to behave or what you're going to experience in this event, and that there's a mismatch between what you observed and what you predicted. That causes anxiety. So what that anxiety is a miscommunication, right? So if I were to give you a glass of water and it's vodka and you chug it like water, it's going to shock you.
Oh, I had a friend do that to me once.
Right? So
I was angry. I was at work too.
yeah, so then what you start to smell the water to make sure that it's not, right? So that happened. I was drinking my shot glass of tequila, and my son came thinking it was water, and he took a chug, And for like 5 days, he was like, now he kind of doesn't really want to grab my glass of water anymore. And when he does, he kind of smells it and makes sure that it's not tequila, which I don't drink tequila every single day or like all the time, but it was just that one instance created a new prediction to how this environment is going to be experienced. Does that make sense? That's what's happening when you're wanting to freak out or have this moment of expression of anger, and they're like, calm down, like just chill, like figure it out. Right. So your body is being told that it needs to go here, and they're telling you it needs to go here. There's a somatic error between the action that you're taking because of what you're observing and what you're actually doing. So what does that do? It creates higher mental stress. Because now you're constantly wondering, well, is this a good time that I can do it? When can I actually let go of all this? And that's where movement comes in. Because you can use movement, which is not, again, it's a different lens, but it's the same expression. So I use movement and going, okay, so all that anger that you have built up because people told you to calm down, that ball is those people. Slam the shit out of them and kill them, right? Which sounds like a very harsh thing to do, but
No,
the
I get
primal
it. No,
self
I get
wants
it.
to express it,
Yeah. Yeah. I get
right?
it.
So that's where the miscommunication happens. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So this is why movement is so powerful, because yeah, in that moment is already passed, right? There's nothing we can do to change that moment, except we can use movement to regain perspective of that moment and change our perception. You can never accept or go into a flow state without expressing the fight, right? So another lesson I've learned, even though my wife forgave me 6 years ago for that one fight that we had about something stupid I did, those were words. Cognitively, she's like, no, I forgive you, we love, we hug, da, 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 da. 6 years later, we get into some sort of alternating argument that triggered the same moment that happened 6 years ago. And guess what happens? All those details came back. She doesn't know where she put the phone 5 minutes ago, but she remembers exactly the date and time 6 years ago when that moment was so aggressive for her. So what does that show you? Cognitively speaking and accepting something is a justification for a lack of expression of fight of that moment. Does that make sense?
No.
No. So when you, let's say you write affirmations, I am a beautiful blah, 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 blah person, does that make it a reality?
No, to my
It can to a certain extent.
But you said cognitive, say that again, what you
Cognitive acceptance
said? Uh-huh.
is a falsification of expression of fight towards an event.
What do you mean by that? Cognitive?
So is there a moment in time where you've had an event or a trauma where you've mentally accepted it, but somehow we keep talking about this event or trauma?
You're pissed.
Well,
It still
Okay.
brings a rise of emotion towards it.
but I think there's a lot of reasons why that's so, though.
Right,
And
I agree.
so one way to help resolve that trauma is by having some kind of physical expression. Is
Right.
that your point? Okay.
Yes.
So how does this all fit into training and working out? Okay. Okay.
The training allows you to change how your cells are moving and how your cells are communicating.
Okay.
So the behavioral, so that event that happened, let's say the fight with my wife 6 years ago, caused a change in how her body holds on to stress, right? So have you guys ever been doing, nothing has changed except for there was something where it was either over socialization or a meeting, and out of nowhere, like the shoulder just feels kind of heavy and tight. You're like, oh man, I could just use a massage right now, right? So that massage is a falsification that you've overcome that event. So what training allows you to do, even though you don't realize it, and why you get so outside of there's a delayed gratification in that reward system and that dopamine that comes in, but you're also rewiring how the body is seeing stress or
So,
events.
how did you rewire the way your body sees stress through your mentor and the work that you did that's made your working out more
So
useful?
yeah, so we do, I call them expression sessions or phylogenetic hierarchy workouts. So through movement, again, movement, the exercise is a byproduct through creating enough physical stress, which means that I'm going to create enough blood flow, I'm going to raise the body temperature, and I'm going to increase the amount of intensity or pain in a certain muscle. I'm able to rewire how the body observes the world. So Carl Friston had this, it's a very simplistic version of it, but you guys can go read more about it. But essentially, we observe, we predict, and then we experience.
Okay, and if you're gonna get here, just tell me, it's fine. But so how did you, like you were having some constriction and issues with your working out,
Yes.
and then somehow you and your mentor, like what were the emotional issues that were impacting your working out, and then how did you do, you know?
Yeah, so so let's do this. So let's go here really quick. So observation, how do we observe? Eyesight's one of them. Smell, taste, pressure, sensation, right? The body is taking in all of these inputs, right? These inputs are all sent through afferent signals up to the brain. The brain then goes, holy shit, like right now, holy shit, I'm being challenged, so think Richard, think big. I don't know if you guys have seen my right calf going. And then I have an experience. So we've been told that we were more reactive beings than predictive beings. We've always been, I think, therefore I am. You are, therefore you think. The input is coming in first, and then the brain needs to rationalize it and create an experience that fits your reality or your belief system. So for me, my belief system was I can keep pushing through.
Okay.
Right? So I can keep pushing through, but I don't have, I still suffer with a little bit of imposter syndrome, and such is life, right? I don't have any, PhDs, and I don't have massive qualifications and certifications and accreditations. I do have thousands of people that I've helped get out of discomfort and physical, mental, and emotional.
Yeah.
Right? But for me, the direct correlation of the left lat was a lack of self-confidence and an insecurity in my own body to express outwardly with the environment. Whether it was right or not, it doesn't matter the justification. This is how the body perceived the environment.
So it was a lack of confidence that was causing your left lat to not
have less,
fire
right.
properly.
So in order for a muscle to fire, it needs to have neural output, especially when you look at bigger muscles. The brain needs to be able to send signals to the brain, to the pec to fire.
Wow, look at that.
So it wasn't that you don't mean confidence in the gym to execute a lift. You mean confidence in life, in general.
Right. Exactly.
So then how did you, and if you're gonna get to this, that's cool, but how did you link those up and use the knowledge of the lack of confidence showing up in your left lat not firing?
Right, so the first thing that we talked about, so the first thing that led me down these steps was talking about mobility. So we talked about mobility, and you have shoulder pain, right? So we have shoulder pain, and you get diagnosed by a PT or a chiropractor or somebody that there's either a misalignment in your structure, right? In your posture, there's a misalignment, or you need to squeeze your shoulders back, or they say that you have upper trap dominance or an inflamed supraspinatus. Those are the symptoms.
Okay.
The diagnosis, or usually what the problem tends to be, is there is a lack of tension or capacity to create tension in the pec, the teres major, the lat dorsi, and the oblique. Okay? So we started to realize that the body works as a whole unit. I cannot fragment just the shoulder because it could be a core issue. So that was the first step. Understanding that we need to find mobility, not give people flexibility.
Yes.
Meaning we can all put our arm overhead, right? Now, put your hand on your chest, a little bit lower, squeeze the chest, and pretend like you do a shoulder press. You can do it right now, right? And as you inhale, bring that arm overhead. You won't be able to go past the mobility of your chest. So it starts to show that I can do an exercise 10,000 different ways. So it means that exercise is a byproduct, not the product. Does that make sense? Because if I don't have the mobility to get the barbell from here to here, I'm gonna find any sort of way to get there.
Okay, yeah.
So we started to put that together. First and foremost, you understand the body works as a unit, an entire muscle chain, and we need to find mobility, not flexibility. Okay? From there, we started to study a little bit more of the nervous system, and we created it's an exercise called Swami. It's a methodology a breathwork methodology I've created. So it starts to connect the connection of breathing and contracting the muscles at the same time, which allows you to essentially upregulate or downregulate the nervous system. And we started to move on creating physical intensity to go from a freeze state. So for example, my lat, freeze, meaning I can't get it to contract. So what do I need to do first? I need to figure out how to get it to tense.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can't tense the pec, what does it matter if you're doing a push-up? Look at, like I'm doing the push-up movement, there's no pec engagement.
Right. So how did you figure out how to move it if it's frozen?
I did hours and hours I looked at all of the exercises that every bodybuilder has put up. It says, this is a lat exercise. And I did all of them for like 3 weeks until I realized which one was the one that was connecting to the lat. I said, oh, this one works for me. For me, it was a one-arm landmine row because it didn't let me displace the tension to my trap as I pulled up. So I started to get connection to the lat.
Okay.
And as I started to get connection to the lat, from a physical standpoint, I can now bench press with more confidence.
Right.
From the mental standpoint, I'm like, ooh, I'm not feeling my shoulder pop. This is awesome. From the emotional standpoint, now I felt confident that I could go into the world and do the bench press.
Okay.
But it also started to change, not just in there, but it started to change being able to go and talk to other gym owners and going, hey, I know it sounds crazy, but I have this new method. So it started to build my confidence, not just in the gym, but outside of the gym.
Okay, so once you identified like your lat isn't firing and it's causing these other issues because other muscles are compensating, then you looked at a whole bunch of lat exercises, tried them all out, figured out which one helps you actually engage your lat.
Yeah.
And then you have the mental and emotional come after because you felt successful and you were able to get the gains that you want.
Essentially. But then,
I'm tracking.
And so, but again, the body's always holding on to information. So, I always use this one because this was like one of my biggest epiphany moments. So I was doing that, I call it a phylogenetic hierarchy type workout. And I pushed so far that I was in this bodybuilding gym in Melbourne, Australia. And it's like bodybuilding, like I'm talking, there's needles in the trash can, like bunch of roided out dudes, like it was like a basement dungeony type thing. And I was doing this workout and I did a stretch, and my mind, my body, my soul, like let's say the spiritual side of things took me directly back to when I was 3 years old, learning to be potty trained in preschool.
Yeah.
And it was like a, kind of like some curtains, and then there was like a bathroom. And so I was peeing, and there was people outside, little kids, that were laughing at me. That's what I say. How rude, right? But you say that now as an adult, you're like, oh, well, kids, you're learning and you're making funny sounds. The perspective, okay. But for me, from that moment on, my timeline and how I perceived a public bathroom changed forever, which changed me forever. So I can't go back and change that instance, but I can gain perspective of like, okay, so that was the reason. And now I can go give myself a hug, like, oh, it's all right. We all make sounds. After that moment, I could go pee in public. So the way the body learns is through enough physical stress to change the cellular communication. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I'm following you on the neuroscience.
So the body is holding on to these triggers because otherwise it'd be way too much work for the brain. And so this is what happens when you become extremely hypervigilant. Is the body stops moving and your brain's like, there's 30,000 different issues that can happen. Social anxiety after COVID was a huge one, right? Because we reclused so much that now stepping outside of the box is very frightening. So we need exposure therapy.
Okay, so when you were saying earlier, like if the shoulder's up and this, and that means the mother issues or something, like I didn't catch all of it, but where does that come from? Like I'm kind of interested in that part.
Yeah, a lot of working with people. So once we started to do the phylogenetic hierarchy and understanding that, using the Swami breathing methodology, like I started to play, and I would have clients that would come in. They're like, "Hey, I have back pain. I have this and that," and so it's as they were showing me their physical pain, I would bring in how's the relationship with your mom? Oh, do you have any stored traumas? Or do you have this? Or do you have that? And I would just ask it and then just kind of step away from it because they're like, I'm here to just get my arm to move without pain. But most of I would say like 100% of the time was spot on. And I was like, okay, so from a physical standpoint, it makes sense. But what about from people who don't go to the gym? So then I started to go to bars because I like to go to bars. And I'd order a beer and I'd sit down, I'd start talking to people. And we'd have a conversation. I was like, hey, so do you have discomfort in your shoulder or do you have discomfort in the right hip? Like, oh yeah, holy shit. How do you know that? And I was like, oh, I was just curious because I would get to know their life. So if you start asking questions about their lives and their pattern and how they're perceiving the world, you get the exact same physical discomforts.
So how do you use that information about their history to help you with what you do with their workouts?
Yeah. So last week I had an assessment with a guy from San Diego. He was a special ops for 16 years. He did, I think he said over 5,000 hours in Iraq. So has a whole lot going on. We were doing the assessment. He's been having shoulder pain, again, physios, everything else. Has PTSD, went to go do an ibogaine treatment. Has tried all the facets of getting help. Still isn't doing anything. And so we did an assessment. So I started to look at how the body was holding on to tension. And I started to see that there was an issue with the left shoulder, not so much the right shoulder, even though the right shoulder was the one that was in pain. And I started to see some issues with the hip. And so, as we were going, I was like, hey, there's going to be some stuff that's going to come up. So just to let you know, like, I was like, we can keep it at a pure, like for me, it's like I can keep it at a pure physical level and get you out of discomfort, but the triggers will bring it back 3 months, 6 months later. So there'll be a point where you're going to get strong enough, but that pain's going to come back because you're not dealing with the behavioral observational piece.
I gotcha.
And he goes, he's like, I'm willing to go wherever you want to go. And I was like, cool. And so we did Swami, we did some front rack carries, we started to get tension in the pecs. And so if I were to make the assumption that PTSD and the war was his biggest issue, I've already lost. Which is what everybody's been doing. Well, you were at war, dude, and you have all these traumas. And so I listen to the body. I don't care what stories you're telling me. I want to know exactly what's happening and how your body observes the world.
Yeah.
And so what I found is he had massive tension here. And so I went in and I was like, hey, there's, I was like, what I'm seeing is there's a massive lack of acceptance towards your motherly figure or your mom. And there's a lot of pent-up aggression because you are, like we were talking about the superego versus the id. You want to act in a very aggressive behavior because you have a different sense of what reality is and how you can behave as in a primal self versus how you're being forced to behave now. He goes, yeah, dude, holy shit. So the problem, the symptom comes as physical discomfort. Right? And then a little bit of mental issues because in our society, you shouldn't think about wanting to kill somebody with your bare hands because that's not the right thing to think about. But,
Oh,
people,
I do.
But you know what I mean? But behaving on it is not right. So those were the issues that we started to clarify. And so what I did is we created a workout where the physical intensity allows his mind to go, I'm not doing a bench press, but allows the body to start to gain a new way to observe the reality that he is living in. So
what's the new way you have him, like when he's bench pressing, is he thinking that he's like...
I push so much physical intensity into the body that you're not thinking. You're allowing the body to rewrite itself and how it communicates. So when you look at strength, right? So when you look at strength, in order for you to get stronger or for you to change whatever is going on in your body, you need neural output you need muscle quality, muscle quantity, and then you can add a skill. Okay? Everybody focuses on giving you the skill, getting from point A to point B. I focus on massive amount of neural output. Okay? There is a hierarchy to your nervous system in order for you to be truly present. And when I say truly present, you're thinking about being present right now in the now, like you would with meditation or breath work. I'm saying I need you to be present with the root cause of your issues. So this is where seeing the body and how it holds stress. So if you're coming with me with back pain, I'm going to take you to the root cause of why you're having the back pain. So the way that you do that is the nervous system. I'm running out of space here.
Flip it, brother. You can flip it.
Oh, how do you flip it?
Oh, that works too. Deadlift 700 pounds.
Yeah. So the nervous system has a hierarchy. It has 8 steps. The first 5 steps are really all about automatic. So breathing, different functions that are very automatic. After that, it gets to a point where it goes, ooh, I should be kind of alert, right? So this is you who has the same drive to work every day. Yeah. Who has gone driving to work and gotten to work and gone, holy shit, I hope I didn't kill anybody. Kind of autopilot, right? So you're autopilot. Then a car whizzes by or a dog, you're like, holy shit, and you're present. And now you're, for the rest of the ride, you're like super, super present and alert, right? So I'm pushing the nervous system enough to get to its utmost amount of alertness, which allows you to let go of the conscious mind and allows you to listen to the body. And so in order for us to make any sort of change, which is again physical, mental, and emotional, we need 3 things. We need raise in blood pressure. We need raise in body temperature. And we need pain, right? And pain, again, is a word for intensity. Pain and pleasure are the same thing. It's about perception. Right? I always say, like, squeezing your nipple hurts if it's random, but when you're in the middle of the act, it feels kind of good. Right? So pain and pleasure, same thing, it's just a perception. So if we can raise blood pressure, if we can get body temperature to go up, and if we can handle the pain and the intensity, we can change how we observe the world. Because we're raising ourselves to be present physically, mentally, and emotionally. And what I do is the body's holding on to the information. So I bring that blood pressure, that body temperature, and that pain to a very specific point in your body where you're oscillating heart rate, breath, and muscle contractions. So your present moment isn't right here, right now. It could be when you're 3 years old and you're being made fun of that you're peeing. It could be because your mom's beating the shit out of you. It could be because your dad shaved your head because you were complaining that you needed a haircut. I've had all these different stories.
Okay, so like, how did you do that with the seal?
Well, that's a trade secret.
Like, okay, is that the thing?
No,
so you're doing some. Okay, so somehow
I'm not doing anything
with the weight you're having him lift and the way you're having him lift it, and his breath work.
You're oscillating heart rate, breath, and muscle contractions.
Okay,
The body wants to displace tension because we're a lot more like cats. We love comfort. We love to have control. Losing control is scary. So we find ways to displace tension. So who does this when they're doing something hard? Edgar, I think I'm feeling my shoulder kind of tweak out. Is it the right position? I don't know if I'm doing it right. Right? You talk. It's a displacement of tension. Physical intensity. You start to feel the physical intensity in the pec. You're like, oh, I can't do anymore. That was hard. What
about when you're grunting?
Yeah, that's a way to get yourself to the sympathetic nervous system. So what's another way to do it? What's the first thing that they teach us in strength and conditioning? Brace. And you brace. When you inhale, you upregulate and you disconnect. You stay hypervigilant. You keep coordination. You keep the sympathetic nervous system. You disconnect from the body. That's why powerlifters never feel their body when they're squatting. Until something pops.
And how long did it take, like with your seal, for this?
We did 90
for
minutes.
the trade secret. So he had his
shoulder pain. So he
was released in 90 minutes.
The way that he
and it was done. There was no more.
Well, no, it comes back.
Okay.
It's not that. Otherwise, I'd be living in an
Yeah.
island. So people can come see me. You know what I mean? No. So you have to understand that it takes active work. You need to be present. You need to push the system. So the first session is, okay, we need to create awareness of what's happening. And then the second one is, do you want to change? So do you want to change your belief system? Some people do, some people don't. And some people think they do, but they're not capable of doing so. Because it takes energy. And the body wants to be comfortable. Right? We all know how to eat healthy, correctly? Correct? But I see sidecar donuts, I'm like, damn, a donut sounds good right now. Right? Knowing is 5% of the problem. Taking the action on it is the hard part. And you have behavioral cycles. So you go, it's the well-done control function. So you're always moving through this. This is perfection. You're never fully perfect. There's glimpses of perfection that you're chasing. And so all I'm looking for is minimizing the displacement of tension, minimizing the amount of upregulation or downregulation. Right? So you can think of the bottom part as like depressive moments and the up part as high anxiety. We want to minimize those. Because if we can minimize those, we can live in a more active present way. We can lower inflammation. If we lower inflammation, there's less pain. There's less mental stress, there's less physical stress. Yeah?
So Rich, when you put the seal on, was it more like max effort until pretty much the failure to retrain his neural output?
Yeah, so we did Swami breathing, then we did front rack carries, then we did floor presses with a very specific, we did Barracuda smashes, and then floor presses with a med ball. And I was focusing, just getting the pecs to fire. And I pushed the intensity for him to start to connect, and then of course, you could say like, okay, well you'll push intensity by doing 100 repetitions. But if you're not using the chest for 60 reps, you're not doing what I'm asking of you. So again, I'm looking for blood pressure, body temperature, pain, and intensity in the pec major. I'm focusing on the muscle that I want to fire, not the exercise's points of performance. So he would displace the tension by holding the breath. He would displace the tension by just going into a full collapse and just surviving. So the dude has the mindset of a killer, right? I was like, I understand that if I told you to hold this weight here for 37 hours, you would not budge. He goes, yes. I was like, that's not what I want. The goal here is to get your pecs to fail. The goal here is to feel the pecs fire. I need you to be present with the breath, the oscillation, the contraction. So it's about how you approach the movement that matters most. The movement is the byproduct. So I push enough intensity for him to not care who's around, for him to not care that I'm counting reps or not counting reps, for him to just do what I'm asking of him, which is find the intensity in the pec. Doing so will get you to a point where you're physically, mentally, and emotionally present in whatever timeline you're in. So we can think of Einstein's relativity, right? If you were to take a movie reel and you put every single frame and you stack it on top of another, you're currently here. But if you look up, you can see your future, and if you look down, you can see your past. That's essentially what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is I'm allowing you to shift your timeline and go express anger that was never truly expressed. Because they told you to relax and be more calm about it. Because your dad said, shut up or I'm going to give you a spanking. Because that's the moment of physical intensity that your body, your nervous system chose to react differently in order to best survive. We learn how to behave based on events.
Okay, so I'm following everything you're saying. I'm super interested in this. Here's my question. I couldn't figure out how to make my lats work.
Yes.
Especially on one side. So if I'm having trouble doing that, then you have your trade secret, if I come see you, is you would help me figure out how to make that happen.
Right.
Based on doing breath work, asking me about my history.
Based on what's happening with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's like we need to get to the objective part, but
yeah.
Based on how you perceive the world and what's happening in your world will be based on how much mobility or neural output you have on that day. So like I had my parents when I was living in Amsterdam, my parents came to visit. My wife took off for 3 weeks, so I had my parents and my kids and myself living in a house. I was living in a couch, and Amsterdam living is a lot smaller than California living, so it's a small apartment, maybe like 900 square feet. And I'm a very sociable person, and it doesn't bother me all that much, right? But after a week and a half, I was like going to the gym, and I was like, oh my God, my shoulder's killing me, right? And you always justify your own issues and your own bullshit. And so I was like, what the hell? And so I was like, starting to get worried, because I'm like, I'm always saying bench press is not the enemy, and if you know how to move and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, but everything was moving to range of motion, everything was perfect. There was just pain right here. I was like, what the hell? And then my parents took off, my wife showed up, and she was like, oh, how was the trip? And like, how was the kids? How was your parents? I was like, oh, it was great. Like, it was nice that we're watching the kids. I was able to go work. She's like, don't you think it was like too much? And that moment, like it clicked, it was like a black swan moment. And I was like, holy shit. Literally, my parents left, my shoulder pain went away. It's environmental. So everything that you're feeling in physical discomfort is your body speaking to you. It doesn't have words, it's not inside out. So the only way that the body can communicate is through intensity. So the body is telling you how it's observing the environment based on how it truly sees the environment, not on how you're justifying it. Right? I justified it. I was like, oh, well, they're here, they're helping. You can say whatever you want. The body's still going like, dude, you need some space. Like, it's too much. Right? And that could be based on back experiences from me having to go live with them when I was 18. And, again, there's no good or bad. It's just shit happens, and your body learns how to behave in environments. Yes?
There was a time where, this was like 5 years ago or something, I first came to Richard. I mean, we've kind of kept in touch. Anyway, I had this shoulder issue, and I went to him just for like pain stuff, and then it went down to, confidence stuff, and then it went down to what are you scared of, all stuff that I didn't even think was supposed to happen. But it was the same thing. It was like his homework for me was go find your lats. And I've been in the industry for 15 years, and I'm like, I know how to find my lats. Like, I got nice lats, bro. Same thing. And I spent hours trying to find my lats. That was a point that I wanted to make before. But also, every year, Christmas time, I have shoulder issues, and it lasts 2 weeks. Christmas, that's it.
Yeah.
So funny how your body reacts.
Yeah, and I know why, but it's just kind of what you were talking about, So yeah, I just wanted to share that part.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I
so-
started coming to this gym because I knew I was gonna see my ex-husband at my daughter's wedding.
Oh my gosh.
You want to get in shape?
No, it was all about this. It was because I'm lucky to be alive. I'm lucky he didn't kill me. He tried to kill me in every other way. Financial abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. And I was gonna be put in a same room with him, and that's when I found you. And thank you. And I survived it.
Thank you. Yay!
Because I knew all of this in a weird way, but I didn't know it like how you are so precise, obviously, and everything. But I knew that being physical was gonna help me get through all the memories and all, just everything.
No, it's good. Yeah.
Can I just say just one thing? Also, I've been a strength and conditioning coach since 2012. I met Edgar a couple years ago at different modality. From what I experienced is most of just people in general working out, they don't take accountability as far as like their own body. I just feel like you should get 100%. Like, you know what? You know your body more than the coaches. Take full responsibility.
Yeah.
That's I think that's the most important thing.
That's the one right there. Yeah, so when we're looking at stimulus, right, so it's always we talk about the states. So we use movement to change how we feel about past events. We use breathing to change the states that we're currently in and wanting to change, right? So that's why like the breathwork stuff that's becoming very high and mighty right now. It's all about being in the now and being present. and then you use nutrition for what's to come, right? So nutrition, if you look at it, we should have carbs or sugars before we're going to go do something active. We should have more proteins and fats when we're wanting to downregulate and rest and digest, right? So this is a very simple overview, but it's the necessity to kind of understand that movement is what allows us to change how we feel about past events. So that's a perfect example, right? I mean, I started, I always say, you always join a gym or you start training hard when you have a big fuck you to somebody in the past, right? For me, it was like the doctors for the longest time, right? It was like, there's always something that you're trying to overcome about your past when you go join the gym. It is what it is. So finding the lats, right? So how do we get you to find the lats? So everybody that comes or joins a gym, there's always an objective behind it. There's a goal, right? So we can look at the goals as far as a immediate win. What do we want out of this session, or what do we want out of this exercise right now? The means goals, which is usually why people come. The wedding is in 3 months. I want to have the confidence to be in the same room. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to bench press. I want to deadlift. I want to blah, 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 blah. The means goals are always 6 months to a year tops, right? Maybe you get somebody that's, you're really lucky, it's like 5 years down the line. And then in reality, you have the end vision. Like, where is the value of movement for you? What happens when you lose the weight? What happens when we get you to find the lat? What happens when you go to the wedding, right? And that was my biggest struggle as a coach, and part of my imposter syndrome is anybody can go move. Like, what's my value in this industry, right? And so it's being able to understand that your end vision needs to have one of these 3 things. It's always one of these, right? So there's safety, confidence, and performance. Those are always why people come into the gym or why you're here training, right? Performance being, I want to lose the 10 pounds, I want to go to the wedding, I want to deadlift a certain weight, whatever it may be.
Yeah, but now that the wedding's over, I'm here for love.
There we go.
I
like it.
I love
Beautiful. So what I started to realize is you cannot have performance if you don't build safety or confidence, right? So getting you to find your lats requires safety in your body, right? In order for you to have the confidence to move without feeling injured doing pull-ups or anything else, which will give you the performance of being able to use the lats. Safety requires volume. Simplest way to teach it, how do kids learn to walk? Right? They fall 10,000 times to learn the 10,000 ways not to walk. And then they start walking. And then running, and then again, and then jumping, and then again. I'm in that stage. Right?
Learning how to jump.
Right now it's declining. I'm still learning to jump. It's hard. Right? So the safety comes with volume. And this is where, as I see health professionals and I see people, they want to skip this part. They want to skip the volume part. They want to go straight to the performance. Right? Some people will put in the time on safety, build the volume up, build the hours and hours and hours, and then they'll start to gain confidence, so they'll start going heavier, they'll start doing whatever it may be, and then they can get to their performance. Now, what I tend to see happen, especially when we're looking at more performance-based athletes, is they start to pretend that they have confidence. Confidence is intensity. Physical intensity, we talked about it, right? We start to replace confidence with volume, which is a falsified sense of intensity. So we start to do more because we think that that is more intense. Does that make sense?
You're saying people do more volume, more amount
More
of
volume.
working out rather than
More
change
present,
quantity.
right. Right. So this is where you start to see people becoming more passive and less active. So this is why, you know, I understand people want to come here and just have a sweat and go home. But again, if you're here and you're thinking about taxes and the wedding and this and that and what I have to do over here, are you really training? Right? That's a passive approach. That's creating volume, that's not creating intensity. If you're here and you're doing, you know, let's say bench press or shoulder presses or push-ups, and you don't feel your pecs, are you really doing push-ups? maybe in the lens of a point to position, but if the goal is to get your chest stronger, then you're not, right? So we need to make sure that we go through the stages of volume, of exploration, before we can start to exploit it in order to get to our reward, our goal. Does that make sense? So this is very important because if you don't have safety, you can't expect to perform. At least maybe in the short term you can, but in the long term, there's the consequences. Does that make sense? Questions? You had all the good ones. Right? So it all starts to play together, right? And so again, it's like, I'm not saying that movement is the only way. I'm not saying cognitive therapy. I'm not saying don't go to the physiotherapist or don't go to the chiropractor. It's being able to understand that when we have discomfort, if the symptom keeps coming back, there's a miscommunication. And so this is where you're falsifying confidence by getting manual therapy and not having an action plan afterwards.
Oh, see, that's interesting you said that, because as I was getting ready for the wedding, not only was I coming here, but I was also going to therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That helps.
yeah, like how am I gonna make it through this day?
Right. Yeah, and so when you get rid of the physical pain, right? So let's say you have the shoulder pain and you get a massage and it feels good and you can move it. You're sending signals to the body that it's safe and confident to go move in a skill that you already know. Does that make sense? So if you overload the system, the body's gonna go, holy shit, the pec's still not working, and you just told me that I didn't need to fire my mid-trap. So what happens? It fires harder. And here comes the insanity of having the same loop for every 6 to 8 weeks. So if you're gonna get massage or physical therapy and get the inflammation to come down on the supraspinatus, we need to understand that we need to find a way to strengthen the pec so that it can maintain the load when you're moving.
Okay, so when you said like your lats weren't working, and you had to go through all these different exercises to figure out which one is the one that you needed to work that. Like, is that like, I feel like sometimes I do exercise and I'm not working the right muscle.
Yeah.
Like other things are getting way tired before.
Right. Yes.
So like, how do we? Like, I don't know how to find these muscles.
Yeah, that's
me too.
it, I don't
Right?
either.
Like, it's like, oh, you should be using your pecs. I don't really feel that. I don't know how to do that.
So there's a couple things. The first one would be going towards real world objects, which Edgar does a good job. Sled work, sandbags. Then the second one is, do you need neural output or do you need muscle quality? So for you, you need neural output. So like, I don't feel my pecs. What do you mean? Right, so we need neural output. You need isometric contractions at the strongest end range. So who can't feel their pecs? Yeah. So let's do something simple. Everybody can stand up, right? Let's put some practical application to this.
Put some music on.
We'll keep it simple.
Oh,
We'll
dear.
do it quickly, right? So we'll do this and then we'll do some other things. But essentially, when you bring your hands together, right, just kind of relax the shoulders and start to push. And again, it doesn't need to be a I'm going to kill you type squeeze, just a nice light push. And see if you can slowly feel the contraction of the pecs. And just hold. And I want you guys to breathe in through the nose, then smile. Pretend that you're whistling. Yeah. Inhale. The goal is to feel the pec. Okay? If you're feeling the shoulders, it's because you're starting to squeeze too hard. So lighten up the shoulders. Just slowly start to squeeze the balls of the hand. I don't know what you would call balls of the hand. Right? Just inhale, don't hold the breath. See, most of you starting to hold your breath again. So that's a displacement of tension. So inhale. We don't hold the breath, we don't stop squeezing. There we go, we're going to keep going. Who's feeling their neck or their shoulders? Don't do that. That's not what I'm asking of you. So what happens is you're expecting me to give to you in a silver platter your pec engagement. So if you're feeling your neck or your shoulders and you're not feeling the pecs, start to move the hands around a little bit. See where you can feel at least one pec. Start with one pec. So push together, maybe go out. You can start going out. There we go. I always tell people, pretend that you're going to hold a tequila shot between your boobs. Right? You're not going to hold it with the shoulders, you're going to hold it with the boobs.
Pecs with your boobs, right?
Pecs are your boobs, exactly. Yep. Come back in. You can go down, right? So explore. That was better. Yeah, there we go. So nothing. So keep squeezing. You're not breathing. You're displacing tension. So breathe. There you go. Now bring your hands up to the eyeballs. There we go. Keep holding. Breathing. You guys aren't breathing. Most of you stop breathing. See, you already displaced the tension. So you see how quickly it's been less than 30 seconds, but because you're trying to survive the objective of squeezing your hands together, you find some way to do it. So I'm breathing. My pecs are on fire, by the way. So if we could get this together, that'd be great. Bring your hands down to your belly button, and again, squeeze. The goal is to try and feel the chest. So here, it's like you really want to show off the chest. We're squeezing. Yeah, if it brings you to rest, you can. Long exhale, so I want super long exhales, almost like a power wash, like a power washing machine. And relax. And now I want you guys to just nasal breathing, walk around the building, and don't talk to anybody. So just breathe through the nose, walk around. Beautiful. Come back to the center. You feel the neck or the shoulders? Both. You feel the biceps? Perfect. So that's a connection. It's getting there. You feel just only neck.
And my
Traps.
The traps, yeah.
Yeah, so what is this? Is this father issues?
That's a husband issue.
I'm not laughing, girlfriend. I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing.
Yeah. So the
I'm totally
problem
serious,
is
by the way.
that
I'm not mocking at all.
no,
Okay.
I get it.
Okay.
There is a need for perfectionism.
Yeah.
So you're trying to find the position to get approval that you're doing the exercise that I'm asking of you. But the problem is that the exercise that I'm asking of you requires exploration, not exploitation. So it's not based on positions, it's based on tension. So this is where
Wait,
you can
say that again. It's not based on what?
position.
Precision.
Position.
Position.
It's based on tension.
Tension.
So you are
Tension
holding
of-
the position. So I can hold here, but I could be on my neck the whole time. Right? So even though right now, like it looks like I'm squeezing my pecs, really all the tension is in my neck.
Well, I could feel it in my pecs when we were doing it, but then at the end I also have tension in my neck and shoulders.
Yeah, it's an overload of the system.
And you're saying it's the perfection.
It's a wanting to revert back to what's comfortable. So remember we talked about comfort,
Yeah.
right? The body's very comfortable, even in a very uncomfortable situation, because it knows that it can survive with this observation.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem, is that we think that, again, the push-ups can help you change how you perceive the world, but if the triggers come back and you haven't changed, it's a lot easier to go back.
Okay, so then you're saying I would have to figure out where did I start going to my traps and
Right.
neck
Right.
to deal with stressors.
Right, so you held it because I was holding it,
Uh-huh.
not because you could keep the tension correctly. So that's what I do with a lot of the clients. Like with the Marine guy, like I was like, okay, go for a walk. And he started walking. He just kept walking and walking. He's like walking like this. And I was like, dude, it looks like your shoulder hurts. Like, dude, it's killing me. I was like, why didn't you stop? He goes, well, you just said go for a walk. I was like, right? So I can't be like, walk and stop. Because then he's just going to be always looking for me to tell him when to stop, which means that he doesn't need to be present. But if I just have you keep going, Like, I felt my neck. Why'd you keep going? I said, feel the pecs. Well, I don't know. That's a good question, isn't it? So you create independence and auto-regulation, which for him was like a whole brand new thing, right? Because he's been doing CrossFit and following strength training programs where it's like, hey, do this amount, do this amount, do this amount. That I can check off and go do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, so, and again, I don't wanna make this about me, so we can, like, you know, whatever. But, like, they'll have me do the med ball thing like this at the gym, and I always end up afterward with my traps and neck hurting, and so
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't, this doesn't work for me. Like, I gotta do, if I just do it this way, it works, but so I'm trying to, like, put the pieces together of, like, based on what you're saying, how do I take this and make it work for me? Like, how do I use this information for?
You are taking the measurements of success and making them the objectives.
Okay, I'm taking the measurements of success and making them objectives. I don't
Correct.
really know what that means.
You are taking the med ball carry, which is supposed to help your shoulders, become the solution to your shoulder health. You're exploiting the exercise without understanding the exercise.
Well, I'm supposed to be like engaging my pecs and they feel engaged when I'm
Yes.
doing it, but then somehow my traps and neck get involved. And I don't know what's happening. Like,
Right. So, right. But that's you answered your own question. I don't know what's happening. Which means that even if I were to tell you, you wouldn't be able to tell. So what we can do is we use breathing as a tool to allow you to be present. So what did I mention a few times here? Don't hold your breath,
yeah,
which everybody started to hold their breath. In through the nose, out through the lips. Right? So you being present would be, but what happened after 15 seconds? Everybody's, and then,
yeah,
what happened, guys? Hello?
yeah.
Right? So again, it's not you, and it's not, I'm not saying you're quitters, I'm not saying that you're miserable people, none of that.
Yeah.
It's the body learns to survive. It sees stress and it goes, oh fuck, but then after this, there's volume. I have to go deal with the kids and I have this and I have that. So I'll just play the role right now. And so again, it's not a mockery that you're not paying attention, you're not putting effort in the gym, because it's not about an attack on you personally. It's your system is so in an overwhelm and slight underwhelm that it goes, do I truly need to be present here? And it's impossible for people to be present all the time. It's you quit.
Yeah.
Everybody quits. I'm a quitter. I quit all the time. It's how the body starts to learn lessons.
Okay.
So there needs to be, depending on if you're again on the more anxious side or the more depressive side, depending on how you react to an overwhelming
I'm more
amount of
anxious.
stress, right? You freak out.
Uh-huh.
So you, and hold the breath. So for you, I need to underwhelm you so that you can win every time.
Well, so are you saying I need to go slower because
You need to-
I
you
freak
need to
out
stop.
when it gets too fast?
You need to stop before you feel the shoulders. So again, breathing is a tool. So
Okay.
what did I mention earlier? If you hold your chest and you inhale, you can only go to your safe end range of motion.
Yeah.
The same goes with movement. So when you're training, stop.
Okay.
You
Okay.
stop 10 steps beforehand.
Do you understand what he's saying? Okay. Are you having a revelation about my problems?
I think you're hearing it in a different way.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
But we can talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So it's a needing to see when somebody needs to be pushed over the limit and when somebody still stays safe to have that comfort. Does that make sense? Again, it's a matter of you need to see what the person's win is. Yeah, you can sit down if you want.
Okay.
What the person wants out. What are the expectations and the services you want? Like there's no the problem with the highly anxious, very type A people. They want just give me the steps that I need to get to the point. That you're missing the whole point that there are no right steps. There are your steps, and you need to figure them out. And the coaches can give you the guidelines, but as a different light. As a different light, you're hearing, we're gonna warm up to squeeze, and every time you hear the word, you press up, as an example. In your head, winning that part, that immediate win, is surviving the whole song while holding on to the ball and pressing overhead every time you hear the word. Winning for me is making the pecs fail. Meaning I'm so shaky because the pecs can no longer hold on to this tension because the intensity, it's on the other side. The pain, the blood flow, the blood pressure is so high because the pecs cannot take any more intensity. So I drop the ball halfway through the workout.
See, and I would say that I'm trying to do what Mark said, and I'm trying to like own my body and say, this isn't working. Give me something else.
Right, but we'll play with the front rack carry in a little bit.
Okay.
And we can check it out. The problem is most of the times there's not enough stress, which is very counterintuitive. This isn't working for me, let me go lighter to figure it out.
Yeah.
You're going
I
to
do
a
that.
position. If I go heavier, the body's going to be forced to work properly.
See, and I freak out and think, well, if I go heavier, then, and I know I have this issue where I use the wrong muscles, then I'm going to hurt myself.
Right, and then I always respond, if I hurt you, I'll give you another free session.
Okay.
There we go, right? So it's partly confidence of the coach to be able to push the intensity and convey the message enough. So let's take the med ball carry for an example. If it's too light, I can hold here for how long? Forever. If it's too heavy, I'm going to be forced. What does the weight do? It's going to push the load down. It's going to depress the shoulder. So when we think about neck pain, right, or shoulder pain, what's the usual symptom or diagnosis they give you? Upper trap dominance, elevation, or rolling forward of the shoulder. How do they try to fix it? Retraction of the shoulder.
Yeah.
How come the opposite of elevation is retraction and not depression? We need to teach the body how to depress the shoulder. And then when you go towards the spiritual side or massage or the emotional part, what do they always say? Oh, when I get stressed out, I just hold everything on my shoulders. Okay, so how can we overcome stress? By taking action on stress. How do we take action on stress? We build confidence to take action, right? So it's all linked back together. They're just feedback loops. So and again, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning yesterday because I have a whole new idea that I'm playing with, and I spent 6 hours in the gym playing the new concepts. Like I spent hours presently working on these ideas and these concepts. So when I see you, I'm not just saying the med ball is going to be what's going to help you change or this or that. I'm looking at a lot of different facets of more stress, less stress, slight positional changes. Like the whole goal here is for me to give you epiphany as a coach, is for me to give you epiphanies that make you think, not to give you the results.
Yeah.
Because if I can make you think, I can make you take action. If you take action, you can change how you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a feedback loop. They're all feedback loops.
So how do you reconcile the ideas of like targeting specific muscle, like, I want to work the pecs or whatever, I need to do that, versus the whole system as a whole, like how you're saying everything has to work together.
Right.
Everything is really isolated and like as a functional, like in real life, you don't just work only one muscle at a time.
Right.
So like,
I do carries, right? So like when you guys are doing front rack carries, sandbag carries, everything is usually done on a more full body.
so is it just like a
exercise
combination of both working specific muscle groups and then doing like?
Then doing the full body. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what we're going to be what you're working towards. But if there's shoulder pain, then I'm going to find out where the root cause is. Because again, you could be having pain on the right shoulder. There's two things that could be the problem. It could be the problem that the right shoulder is doing all of the work and the left side is so weak that you never feel it. So whenever you're doing any sort of pressing, you're always shifting everything to the right side. And then the massage and everything else goes towards the right side. So the right side just keeps getting stronger until there's a structural damage. There could be the issue where the right side is just stacking incorrectly, so we need to get it stronger or build mobility. So do you need, it's a matter of, do you need neural output or do you need muscle quality in that region? Sometimes there's a shoulder pain, but the shoulder pain is being caused by the opposite oblique. Because this oblique is weak, so therefore I need to stack everything on this shoulder. So even if I get this shoulder to be stronger, if I don't strengthen the oblique, as soon as there's an overwhelming amount of load, I'm still going to shift to the right side, structurally. So it's about, when I look at the body, I look at the body through tension, and I stress the body enough, I give it enough intensity for it to show me exactly where it's going to displace the tension to. Because how you displace tension in the gym is exactly how you're going to displace the tension in the real world. And that's part of the selfish brain theory and the diva brain. You need, the higher the stress, the higher the lesson learned. You'll start with boredom. You'll go to anxiety, which is mental and physical. It will be mental first, then physical. It will depend on the person. Then you go towards frustration. You think that what you were going to do was a lot easier than it truly is, and you get frustrated and quit. Then you start to get angry at others. You can blame me, you can blame Edgar, you can blame the object. And then you get angry at yourself and you realize that it was you all along. It's a very powerful statement to understand, like you said, it's you that needs to make the change. It's you that has the problem. I don't know if any of you have ever been doing a workout where you're feeling like you're going to die, and you're like, fuck, Richard, just man up and start moving. Right? That's you taking accountability that you're quitting.
Well, I think though, I would say for myself though, I need, like, I'm not an expert in everything.
Right.
So, like, I've been working on this, you know, can't figure out how to use my traps and lats and stuff for months. And then Chris had me do this rope pull thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what it feels like to have those scapula muscles come together. Like I couldn't make them come together, you know?
Right.
But I didn't know to try that. How would I know to try it, to do this?
Well, that's where you're building volume, you're building safety. It takes time, right? And it's not a, we've been sold this 6-week program to change everything. And it takes time. You know, like it takes time. Yeah.
I've gone as far as in one of our privates with a left pec. I've gone as far as having guys spend 45 minutes. I sat back. I said, you could use anything in the gym. I'm just gonna sit back. You find your left pec.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people walk out of the gym and be like, this is what you're here for, Edgar. This is why I hired you. And I'm like, no, that's not why you hired me. Because I did not tell them exactly how to do it. I wanted them to spend time figuring it out. Just like Richard, he told me, find your left lat. I'm like, I've been training for 20 years, bro. I could do it, but I couldn't. I spent hours and hours and hours trying to get it. And I know exercise, you know, very well. So for the general population, I've gone as far as, you know, telling them, I'll stay an extra 15 minutes. You just use the whole gym, you figure it out. I have a full recording of this guy jumping around, equipment, trying things different ways to find it. And he paid $100 for that session. That's such an investment, long term. If I took 5 minutes to tell him how to contract, it's not gonna get him anywhere. He'll come back the next day and he'll say, he'll need me again. You know, so it's a matter of, like I'll tell Mark, Chris, or Caitlin, I'll say, dude, tell Emily spend the next 2 weeks, whatever it is, during your sessions, to find it. Just find it. Just go get after it. Like, they'll give you $250,000 if you can get your lats to contract.
Mm-hmm.
You'll probably get your lats to contract. You just got to come up with the money.
Okay.
The reason that you can't contract the pec could be physiological, psychological, or environmental.
Well,
there's different feedback loops, right?
I think it's a neural pattern that has gotten so weak. But why did it get like that?
Exactly. And so again, it's feedback loops. What we can look at now is we are here, and you're making the changes towards it. So now it's building. Let's say it took 10 years to get that weak, right, or have that lack of neural connection. It's going to take time to build back up.
Yeah.
Like it took me, I have a very simple exercise called the psoas raise, and when I do seminars with coaches, I go through that exercise, and you sit down and you contract the psoas, you inhale up and you exhale down. And I give this explanation. I go, when I have structural damage, right? So my hip was broken in 35 pieces. Like I have a lack of connection from the pyramidalis, and my lower abs are completely torn from the pubic bone. I was like, it took me, 9 months where I did this for about 90 minutes a day for me to truly start to understand like the basis of a connection emotionally and environmentally to the psoas major, but B, how I displaced the tension, meaning how I disconnected from the psoas just to raise my leg up. I found every single little tweak as to how I could not connect to the psoas and found my way to connect to the psoas. Right? So you're talking 90 minutes every day for 9 months. I mean, thousands of hours were spent on just trying, and I'd be like standing here, like you guys haven't even noticed, but I stand here and I start to connect and I start to rotate and I'm constantly playing with, am I connecting, am I not connecting? Just because that's how I work. I'm not saying that's how you have to work. But I do this at the seminar, and then I have coaches that after 3 minutes go, I don't feel anything, I feel my lower back. Well, yeah, like you can't expect me to give you the 10,000 hours that I did in 3 minutes. I'll give you my philosophy and what I've learned, but that's just a story. You have to go do it. Yeah. And again, this goes again towards information versus knowledge. And the problem is that we're leading ourselves more and more and more towards abundance of information without skin in the game. And this is where we start to lose it. So you have great coaches that are trying to make you independent, and you know, you stay for the community, but it takes work, you know, and how much work it's going to take is really based on how much it's going to take for your system to go through those 5 stages of the diva brain to understand, holy shit, okay. So in reality, like there's a study done at Boston, I believe, with Steve Cotter was the guy that brought it up. When you have a human, you can only challenge 4% of their current skill set. Of their current,
Can you say that again?
you can only challenge a human 4% of their current skill set. Current.
That's sad.
It's not sad, it's compounded. So this is where, so we talk about physical, mental, and emotional, right? So let's start about how well connected are you right now? So I say right now we're gonna grab a barbell. You're gonna load up as much or as little weight as you want that you can physically, mentally, and emotionally walk up to and deadlift. As close to your 1 rep max as possible. How many of you would get at 85% on the first rep? How about 90% of their 1 rep max? Meaning going heavy. For me right now, I'm kind of sore, but if you put 455 pounds on the bar, right now I haven't done anything, I'll walk up and I'll pull it up. Right now I feel safe, confident to perform. I'm physically, mentally, and emotionally not stressed about saying that weight or loading up the bar and pulling it up. But if you were to say do 500 pounds, like, ooh, I'd go a little bit towards like the, I don't know about that, right? Justify getting myself out of it. So if you can only challenge yourself 4%, that means that every time you walk in, you do a self-check and you go, okay, so I have a lot of stress with work, I have taxes are due, all these new fucking regulations. Coach, today I'm just not in it. So today maybe the pecs aren't in it because you just can't be connecting to yourself. Maybe today was the day that somebody cut you off and your kids pissed you off or something. You're like, coach, I'm pissed today. Let's go fucking kill it. Go push the sled, go slam the balls. So this is auto-regulation. In order to get the emotional expression for what you need to perform with safety and confidence. So finding the lats is, the exercise can get you to the lats, but it can also get you to the traps. So it's just being able to understand where you can challenge yourself for that day. And it's going to change. If you had a shitty night's sleep, if you fought with your spouse, if you had amazing sex last night and had the best blind date of your life, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's all going to be dependent. Like, how many of us have had wine and kind of come in slightly hungover, but it was the best session of their lives? Yeah. Right? Which, what's his face? Peter Attia just made a post about it. And I'm like, yeah, of course. The guy's neurotic, highly anxious, OCD. He's like, oh, I just want to tell you guys, like, my HRV said that I was horrible, but because I had a few glasses of wine last night, but I came in and I felt great at the gym. I was like, yeah, dude, because the wine allowed you to downregulate your freaking hypervigilant nervous system, and because you're using wine to actually be present with the people around you, you actually elevated your state of being present, being in the flow, so the next day you're ready to go kill it. Even though your HRV may say something physiologically, environmentally, and psychology, you are much better. So it's a matter about just being able to understand where you are today physically, mentally, and emotionally, and pushing that 4%. If you start to do that over a long period of time, you're going to start to find new lessons, and those compound. So right now it's like, I just can't find my lats. But then once you can connect to the lats, it's like, oh, I can do pull-ups. Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can do that. It compounds. So it's not sad, it's compounding interest. But it needs to be done presently. And that's the hardest part that people have in understanding that as coaches, we're here to help guide you. And we understand, like when I see a client, I see 2 years down the road to 5 years. And so I can see exactly where their pitfalls are. Like with my clients, I'm just looking at that well-done control function. I look at their behavioral cycles. And so I'll start with them, and it's like we start talking like every 3 to 5 days. And then I'm like, oh, you're going down. What's going on? Let's try to do this, do this, do this. And then eventually it's like every 6 weeks, and then it's every 3 months. Then 1 year to a year and a half, 18 months in, the cellular responses change completely in the body. The hormone interactions, so at a cellular level, at a chemical level, at a mechanical level, everything changes to how it responds to life. So like one of my clients, Jody, we did you guys can go listen to the podcast, but you know, when I first started working with her, I was like, it's gonna take about 18 months. And she was like, all right. And it was, in a span of 18 months, there was a lot of negative talk. She tested at a 48 on the depressive scale, on the cognitive depressive scale. Within 7 months, she was down to a 9. So cognitively speaking, the changes happen a lot faster. But then, of course, there was a breakup, so that brought her back down. So we just started to look at behavioral cycles. So then a year and a half in, she had a breakup. She's like, this is the first breakup ever in my life. I'm like, I don't fucking need you in my life. Peace.
How'd you get her not to quit
Not to quit what?
your sessions?
Because I'm awesome. I smile.
Fair. All right.
I do the pecs.
It's the pecs.
Watch out, Rich, watch out.
Man.
I mean, come on, that's crazy. She must have wanted to quit.
Yeah, she quits all the
Or
time.
show up, you know, not come, or
Well, the crazy part is that it's all online, which makes it even easier to quit. But I know her cycles. So like I knew like when it would start coming up, so I'd be like, hey, what's going on? Where's the Swami sessions? I haven't been doing them. You don't have to. I'm just saying it could help.
Because
Like-
you knew her. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
but
pretty cool.
you know, and again, I mold myself based on what my clients need. Some clients need, you know, not
So
to
you're
say
a
that
personal trainer and a therapist.
I'm not a therapist. There's no licensing. I just care about the human that I work with.
Oh, nice.
You know, just like you tell your barber and your hairstylist everything, you tell your personal trainer quite a bit. And so what I've learned to do is I've learned to listen to the body and not so much the stories. Right? So my medium, my form of working with clients is through movement and breath. So I don't need to know the details of everything. If you want to share, you can. But for me, that's still like I have a client of mine that calls me and tells me the whole story, and I'm like, what did you do to Swami? No. Then don't tell me the story. Go do the Swami, and then we have a conversation. Or go do the expression session that I sent you. Because talking is a justification. It's a falsification that you're expressing a fight. Right? Meaning, you can talk all you want, right? Or like I always say, like the keyboard warriors behind Twitter, right? Or Instagram, where they're putting all of these comments, but what are they actually doing? So storytelling versus what you're doing are two very different things. The actions matter more than the words. Right? Yeah. I've read a few inspirational philosophical quotes on Instagram lately. But so that's all I work with. I look at people, and you can tell me whatever story. Like a guy was, you know, that I did the assessment with, he was talking about shoulder pain, and all he ever talked about was his wartime.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's something with the mother figure. And then that's when he broke down, because it was early age onset stuff. So I just look at what the body is telling me, and then I approach it that way. And so all I do is I just get people to move through tension and opposition, and I get them to go from the physical to the mental to the emotional, and then you can also talk about the spiritual part, right, which would be like the change of belief system, right? So like if you look at Taoism, right, it's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So spiritual is about the higher chakras, and so right now there is a big shift where you're seeing the health and fitness space either go way back to pure physical, just do the hard things, because for a while there it went very spiritual, where everybody got into, you know, you get into yoga and the breath work and the meditation and the down regulation because life is so stressful, but then you don't have the physical part. You need to be grounded in this world, otherwise nothing changes. So there's a balance between those four that you're jumping back and forth.
That's what Edgar does.
So there's a balance between it. And so sometimes people need more grounding, sometimes people need to be more spiritual and more down-regulated. But we say we have a very stressful life and everybody's suffering from anxiety, but like I said earlier, if you're hungry, there's Uber Eats. If you're cold, there's a heater. If you're hot, there's an air conditioner. Right? Like, where are the real stressors coming from? Like, yeah, you have taxes and you have this and that, but in reality, like, your life isn't, for most of us, right? Life isn't in danger. So it's all been falsified sense of lack of safety that has led us to have anxiety. And that's because there's no action being done in the body. When we move, when we get grounded, if the body feels strong and confident, the mind can be strong and confident to handle stress. Resiliency and stress adaptation happens both from the physical to the mental and the mental to the physical. But the mental to the physical, a little bit slower. And that's been proven. It takes, cognitively, you can accept a trauma, I think it's like 10 or 11 times faster than physically.
Say that again.
Cognitively, you can accept a trauma about 10 to 11 times faster and overcome it faster cognitively than you can physically. So I had a rock climbing accident. I cognitively accepted, I cried my eyes out, I got angry, frustrated, everything within 1 year. It took me about 10 years to truly overcome the trauma of my rock climbing accident and actually face that part of PTSD. So I had PTSD because I had a rock slide that came down on me and smashed my hip. So I tried to get back to rock climbing a little bit too early on. I started to climb. I did my first pitch, it was 2.5 pitches up, where there was an overhanging wall, and I froze completely. And that's when I stopped climbing because I was like, I put my partner in danger being completely frozen 300 feet above the ground. So I was like, well, I'm not doing that again. So I stopped. And it took me 10 years, again, of moving and building confidence in my body to go back up. And I went up the same mountain, well, not the same one, but the brother mountain of the one that I went up where I had my rock climbing accident. And there was a very similar trigger because it was a very similar environment. And I froze in the middle of it's called like the tongue, like the hillside, where there was rocks. And it was just a pure frozen moment. Cognitively, the body's like, Richard, it's not the same mountains, the winds aren't high, like you're fine, everybody's going through, like just move. And my feet would not move. Physically, it did not overcome it. Heart rate spiked like crazy. Breathing was, when it was very mellow throughout the whole thing until we got to that point. Until again, the physical stress became high enough, the mental stress became high enough, blood pressure went up, pain went up, all the muscles, all the injuries that I had came back up, and there was a point where I was like, Richard, get the fuck over this thing, and you can do it. And then you started walking. And then heart rate dropped down. I went to in the brain network, it's called pure executive mode network, and I walked the rest of the way for like 5 hours at a speed that was way faster than the first half. Because the first half I was enduring. I was pushing myself towards something that I knew was dangerous.
Right. I think you had an implicit memory of the original trauma that got triggered at that moment.
Right, but that's the thing is that trauma can be triggered by a scent. So, you know,
right.
Not to bring up your example,
you can,
right? But let's say that the ex-husband wore a cologne.
Yeah.
And let's say that she's just walking down the street and some guy walks with that cologne. That's going to trigger.
Actually,
you're like,
you know what's interesting? For me, it's verbiage.
Hmm?
It's verbiage. Like, not to, after my divorce, maybe like, anyways, a lot of the trauma, someone said to me, well, you have to lie. And I snapped. So don't ask me to lie.
Yeah.
Like, that it wasn't a scent, it was
The words.
the words, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so-
That was a really bad reaction. Like, I could have just said, you know, I don't feel comfortable lying.
But the reaction isn't. That's where I always say, like, it's not a conscious reaction. That's the thing is people think, like when I work with people with PTSD or, you know, explosive behaviors or whatever it may be, like whatever you want to call it, it's a protective mechanism where your body gets put into a moment where it knows it needs to spark in some way. And so this is where the cognitive, it's not I think therefore I am, it's you're going to behave based on what's around you, the stimulus that comes around you. And so, again, cognitively speaking, I'd gone through a lot of the different, I've brought back a lot of the memories with the Swami breathing. Like I brought back a lot of the memories that happened on the mountain. But until you're on the mountain, you're not going to be able to overcome it, right? But it's for veterans and for military people, their protective mechanisms are so ingrained because they've seen parts of life that nobody else has. They've seen a new lens to reality that nobody else has, right? As somebody that's been through, physical, verbal, emotional abuse has seen life in a way that nobody else has. And so that's why you can give everybody bench press, but everybody's going to have a different reaction. And so this is where these, and I don't have anything against cold therapy or sauna or doing ayahuasca or ibogaine or any of this, but you have to understand that you're opening up floodgates of things that people may not be ready for. And this is where the emotional mapping comes in. There's a reason that your neck is coming up, and that's okay. Because I need to create the safety and the confidence in the body to be able to handle those triggers. But if I just open up those floodways and now tell you that you're enlightened and you're cured, but then the same trigger comes up and the body's not ready for it, you're going to snap. And the body's going to go back towards chronic pain anyways. So, we have to understand what it is that we're doing when we do a lot of this. There's going to be a big blend in the next 3 years. It's already happening with mental health and mental emotional health coming into the fitness space. But it's a lot of people are doing it and they're just following the information, and then they'll hit a wall, and then they go, I don't know. And again, I don't have anything against physical therapists or, acupuncture or chiropractors or cold therapy or sauna or anything, but there's a point where they're just following the protocols without truly understanding what's happening. And that's where my obsession goes, because I want to understand it. I want to be able to have the answers. And, for now, the emotional mapping stuff hasn't been wrong. But more importantly, it's like when nobody has the answers, I do, for the most part, or we're going to explore it and find it together. That's why being able to connect the psychological stuff, the neuroscience, the physiological, the environmental, like everything is playing a role. There is no one way about it. Well then, it's 12 o'clock. Happened again.
He didn't do any moving this time.
I
I
know.
know, I didn't get to the movement part.
Last time he came, it was like a 7-hour seminar with the coaches.
Questions, guys?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So there's, if anytime I feel like I need to cry, I could force myself to cry by doing heavy rows.
Mm-hmm.
Why, just based on your perspective, why do heavy rows? And sometimes I don't even need to, and it'll come out. So why do you think heavy rows makes me like a frustration cry?
Because you can't rationalize it to get it to work correctly. So I recently started to play with this concept, right? So I talk about, having tension, right? So the best way to show tension is with an arch. Right? That's a horrible looking arch, guys. I'm not very good at drawing.
It's not about perfection.
That's true. Every cherry blossom is perfect. IB4E, that's right, yes?
Yes.
I'm also dyslexic, so this gives me stress writing words down on the mic. Okay, so we need tension on both sides of the arches. You have physical, mental, emotional, and then I put spiritual / belief system, right? So belief system is your perception, how you see things through the blinders that you have. So people will quit through emotional standpoints because they don't want to go do the hard work physically. So they're putting it on a pedestal. people will not have a change in belief system because they're not willing to do the work with physical and mental components, rationalization, right? So, you know, again, like as a trigger, like your trigger in your belief system right now states that if X, Y, and Z happen, you have an emotional outburst, which you're being told to be rational about. Does that make sense? So the physical intensity will start to create rationale, which allows you to better buffer the mental versus emotional. The rational versus the pure emotional expression. Does that make sense to you guys? So we need both, because you know we need to have a sense of spirituality, belief system, of a sense of values and principles that you live your life by, right? We're not going to smash people's heads into the ground and go on a rampage. At least that's what I believe. Right? So this is an arch within itself. You need to go from one to the other, and you need to realize when do you need to go on the more physical side, when do you need to go on the more spiritual side and ground. So for you is you get the emotional outburst on the lats because there is still a lack of physical intensity to push through. So you're putting the rose on a pedestal.
That
So-
doesn't really make sense. I mean, he's a really super strong guy.
But he could be strong.
I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me though, that one.
But if it's causing an emotional outburst every single time, it's a quitting mechanism on the emotional side. So he needs more physical intensity. Otherwise, he would be feeling good. He'd be, like, be attacking he's on a fight state.
Wait, so is he saying you have to go heavier?
You're slacking, Andrew.
No, I think, are you saying, let me see if I'm understanding. Are you saying that Edgar's having some kind of like,
I feel like Dr. Phil right now.
okay, never mind.
No, I like it. No. I've meant it in a good way. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying, it may be that he has the neural capacity to move heavy weights, but he could be lacking muscle quality on the physical side, right? So again, we're looking at this, each one of these is its own chess game.
Or it has feelings that
That are attached
he's binding physically, and so
Right.
when he does the heavy row,
Which means that he hasn't overcome it. Which
he's
means that
able
there's still
to
not a
emote.
rationale behind it.
Yeah.
So I've had people, again, crying is an interesting one, right? So crying is very empathetic. It's just releasing stress. And so what I mean by that is the body takes input and expresses, right? So if you were to think of, let's just draw like an orb, right? Okay. So this is William Wright's version of why you have muscle armoring, which is essentially the start of emotional mapping. But essentially you have the superego, how you think that you should behave in this world and how society views you. You have the ego that's buffering, you have your primal self, and you have your innocent child. Okay? All of these need to have, basically input can always come in. So input being stress. So lights coming in, yelling from your parents, from your partner, your dog walking, all these inputs are always coming in. From your inner child outwards, you need to have one channel in order to express. So if your ego is very much blocked because you don't want to let go or because you're trying to behave a certain way, energy gets stuck here. You're being told to calm down. All the energy is being stuck here. And then you don't have an outlet, so what do? You blow up. You have a huge outburst. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I learned not to do the outburst anymore because then everyone says that I'm crazy. So then I'll
Right, so
I'll stay calm in the situation, and then like you said, come in here and then, you know,
slam the balls.
Yeah,
Right, yeah. But
yeah.
there should be there's a sense of, again, crying is empathetic, right? So it could be from sadness, like a sad thing happened, or it could be from joy. Like, have you ever been so overjoyed? Like when my son was born, like I cried. Not because I was sad. I mean, sadness is happiness as well, right? It has two sides of the spectrum. So when you're putting things on a pedestal, you find a way to keep it on the mental, emotional side without going towards the physical, which means that you haven't changed your belief system about your confidence or your lats. You can have the neural output, but not the muscle quality. It's an observational piece that you're still being hunted by the exercise rather than hunting the exercise.
So getting back to the crying though, so is it healthy to cry?
Yeah. But if it's happening every time, it's a quitting mechanism.
Ooh.
Like at some point, we should be able to, you know what I mean? Yeah, and again, I use a quitting mechanism. It's a way for you to survive. It's not a good or bad thing. But you're gonna go, yeah, so you go essentially from boredom, then you have anxiety, which would be mental or physical, then you have frustration. That's where he's at, it's frustration. You have it on a pedestal, it's an emotional quit. Then you'll start to get really angry at others, and then you'll get angry at yourself and realize that it was just you, and now we can change our blinders from just only seeing here to seeing everything going, okay, I want to see here. You change the perception. So crying is part of the way, but it doesn't need to be the only way. Right? If you're doing the same exercise and you're just always crying from it, you're putting it on a pedestal. Because it happened once and you want to try and recreate that experience over and over and over again. Hoping for the same change that happened back then. But you're not the same person anymore. Does that make sense? This is where the philosophical part comes in, but it's neurological. You're wanting, why are addicts addicts? They're always chasing the high from the first time they got really, really high. Right? Obviously there's root cause to the issues of them not being able to handle certain stressors in X, Y, and Z, but the reality is that you're chasing that first high that felt amazing. Until it no longer feels amazing, and then, you're doing things. Right? And you're out in the streets or whatever it may be. But an addict that gets sober is what? Still an addict. So you're still not changing. You're changing the lens of your addiction. You're changing your lens of addiction from methamphetamines to religion or to the gym for 8 hours a day or to 35 meetings a week. You're not changing the root cause. That's why you will always be an addict. But if we can get to the root cause, maybe you don't need to be an addict anymore. Because now you know how to regulate correctly. The addictive, the addictive mechanism comes from needing to have control. Even though it feels like you're losing control, it allows you to have control. That's what you're searching for.
Is control good?
As a human, yes. We're a lot like cats. We want to have control of your environment. So even when you lose control, when you're an addict, you still have control of that loss of control. It's like if you look at dominatrix and submissive people, right? Like you guys know what I mean? Like BDSM stuff?
Yeah.
Like who actually has control? The submissive or the dominant?
The dominant, right?
No, the submissive.
Uh-huh.
She's like, no, whoa. The submissive person always sets the rules. This is how hard you can go. This is what I know because I trained a few of them. Right? The submissive person gets to decide the guidelines of the type of abuse or intensity they get.
Oh.
And they have the safe word, they have everything. The submissive person is still under control. An addict is under control, but they're wanting to lose the control. They want to give the control away. And that's, again, it's a different facet or a different premise. It's the same stress. So that's why I'm saying, you need to get to the root cause. Getting to a root cause of something requires a fuck ton of energy, because I'm telling you that we're going to change how you view the world with movement, and you're thinking, again, the system, okay, so how'd you get from here to here to here? It takes a lot of time because it's a lot of energy to rewrite something that your body as a system says, we've survived this long. Why do we need to change our thing again? Why do I need to change how I behave if I know how to survive? So an addict, not gonna do meth, but if I go to the gym 8 hours a day, I still don't have to face that problem that I needed to change. Because that requires a lot of work, but I could be at the gym walking on the treadmill not having to think about that one thing, that elephant in the room. Right? Cognitive therapy, great, okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, but that elephant in the room is never going to change. Right? So that's where the symptom starts to go to the shoulder, the hip, the knee, the wrist, carpal tunnel syndrome, cancer, The symptom will still show itself. It's a cell danger response. So until you truly deal with the root cause, which means that it requires a lot of energy for you to change completely your religious belief system, your symptoms will come back in different manners. Intolerances to food, skin problems, acne, inflammation in the shoulders, the joints. It's all the same thing. That's why it's like there's no simple way to explain it, because you're taking a machine that has been surviving in the world, which is what it's programmed to do, and you're trying to say we need to, go from Apple to Android. Like, come on, guys, that's a lot of energy, right? So that's the hard part of this. But with movement, present, active, physical, mental, emotional movement, you can change these belief systems over time. Cool? Beautiful. Questions? Awesome, guys. Well, if you guys need any help, I live now in Newport Beach. Edgar has my phone number. I'm always here to help out. If you guys are coaches, we have the Immersion Week and a seminar coming here, or if you just want to learn more about this stuff, in March, mid-March, and I have online stuff as well. Cool? Beautiful, guys. Thank you so much for coming, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I need to remind Christopher Reed.